welcome to another episode of the Exponential Era Webcast. Our guest today is Lance Peppler. Lance is the founder of IdeaStorm. He is an exponential growth consultant, and he is also an ambassador for OpenExO. Lance, welcome to the webcast.
Thank you so much. So thankful to be here. Thank you, David. Thank you, Michael.
So Lance, tell us a little bit about your background.
Sure. As you might notice from my accent, I'm from South Africa. So I'm from the scary world of Africa. But I'm on an international stage. So I worked for Oracle, multinational, obviously based in San Francisco, for 14 years, working in the sales side, in customer experience, different aspects there, doing workshops, doing facilitation. And then I made the bold step in February to start my company IdeaStorm in the background there full time, which, as you said nicely, David, I'm focusing on exponential growth, workshops, sprints, awake sessions, and two-day workshops and all different things. So that's what I'm doing at the moment.
Great. I love your background, by the way. It looks really good.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So what got you inspired to be involved with OpenExO?
Yes. So, as I said, I worked for Oracle as a pre-sales person. Really, it's quite an exciting job. You deal with customers, you deal with opportunities. And I did that for a long time. And I would have done that forever if the bad situation was that, unfortunately, Oracle has an international policy of not giving salary increases, which actually is a good motivation to search for opportunities elsewhere. And so for 5 years, I investigated all sorts of things. I did design thinking, studied through IDEO, Darden Business School, and other areas. And then I found I was late to the party. Everyone seemed to be doing design thinking. And then I started doing idea management solutions, which I really found fascinating, getting companies to come up with new ideas, new initiatives. And that was where the birth of my company came about, which is IdeaStorm, the birth of ideas. I wrote hundreds of blogs, wrote a book that's still available on Amazon around idea management. And once again, I found it was just too much of a pivot to jump from being a pre-sales person at Oracle to doing something completely different, doing idea management. And so around October last year, I went to a conference and met someone who was just starting with OpenExO. He was a global ambassador. And I discussed exponential organizations with him, how companies can grow exponentially. And I was really intrigued. And I thought, I might be late again to the party. I might be coming, once again, everyone, it's like buying a car. Suddenly you realize everyone's got a white car when venturing down that road. And so I started investigating that in October. I dived straight into it. I'm very, very involved with OpenExO. You might recognize the book Exponential Organizations from Salim Ismail, which is now recognized as one of the top 10 business books of all time. And that's around creating edge initiatives, overcoming corporate immune systems, and working with organizations to grow exponentially. So I've been doing that ever since. I have got a podcast, which has now got 63 episodes, around focusing on exponential organization. That's the name of my podcast. And I focus on exponential technologies, as long as like Singularity type of origin, Singularity University origin, and focus a lot on exponential organization. So very exciting, and that's what I've been doing since February.
Cool. Well, we focus on the exponential era, which is kind of the umbrella for all these different activities that we've seen out there. When you start to look at the various parts of design thinking and guiding people on how best to begin the implementation process, or actually even the discovery process, one of the things that we found as a common theme was experimentation. And just doing lots of little experiments seems to be a way to get the flywheel started. What have you found What have you seen? Because that seems to be one that sticks out to us, and obviously we incorporated it in our book, but the idea that how do you get companies comfortable with, if you're going to experiment a lot, you're going to fail a lot.
So I love everything you've just said. I mean, I love the Jim Collins flywheel. I use it extensively. I just absolutely love the Jim Collins flywheel. And from the exponential organization perspective, there's 11 attributes that make up an exponential organization. What Salim Ismail did was he analyzed different companies, Amazon, Uber, Airbnb, and he found out that there were 11 principles, of which experimentation was one of the 11. And so I really firmly believe in experimentation from the lean startup. In fact, I had a meeting with a president of an organization yesterday, and he asked me the question. He said, should I wait until we've got all our, got our solution totally, everything is perfect before we start, or should we start and then work it out as we go? And I said, no, go for it. Come up with a concept, come up with a minimum viable product, go for it, and then you can work through and refine the solution as you go. And that's definitely the way I like to do things, and the way experimentation works.
Yeah, that's great. I enjoyed reading the book, The Exponential Organization. And, in the book, Salim talks about some concepts like the massive transformative purpose, scale, ideas. Can you describe a little bit what those things are so that our audience can become a little bit more familiar with the concept behind an exponential organization?
Of course. Thank you, David. So there are 11 attributes that make up an exponential organization. The one that is absolutely vital for every exponential organization is the massive transformative purpose. And like I said, I've got a podcast, and I must have interviewed about 11 people in the 63 episodes focusing on purpose. And so purpose is definitely, one of the driving things in business today.
By chance, did you ever look at servant leadership?
I have focused a lot on servant leadership over the years. Yes, definitely.
Yeah, because that, 20, 30 years ago, the number one thing in servant leadership, the first item is run to a greater purpose.
Well, Simon Sinek, he's one of the key leaders, start with why.
Yeah.
And so I think he was the originator almost with purpose. And then there's so many other people. But interesting, Michael, I interviewed a lady for my podcast who's focusing on humility. Can you believe it? And she says that leaders who are humble are the best performing leaders, in the world today. She's got 22 different examples in her book. And that's servant leadership at the end of the day. People who are humble, who focus on their employees, focus on their customers, focusing around that. But getting back to the MVP or MTP, massive transformative purpose. So what that means is something that is massive, that is bigger than what your company offers, that you have got these huge aspirations, that transforms an entire industry, transforms the world, and has a purpose for the organization. So that really is the massive transformative purpose. So, if you look at Google, who, wants to change the world and provide, a knowledge for the rest of the world, or TED, as far as, education goes, those are, and obviously who's Elon Musk's company, Tesla. So, creating electronic vehicles and changing the way that transportation takes place. That's an MVP. Would you like me to go through the other 10, or is that a bit of an overkill at this stage?
Well, I think it's interesting, the way these concepts have been organized. He talks about ideas, and then he talks about scale. And one is more, he sort of does the analogy of, right brain, left brain. One is more internal focused, the other is more external focused. So maybe just touch on a few key principles there.
Absolutely. Okay, thank you. Thanks, David. So as you said, 2 acronyms. One is ideas and one is scale. And like you said, David, ideas helps you manage the exponential organization. And then that's the ideas acronym, and then the scale helps you to create an exponential organization. So if you're looking at scale, how do you create an exponential organization? Well, that's staff on demand, having as few permanent resources as you can in an organization, and then hiring everyone on demand. Yep. Creating a community and crowd, having algorithms that can, so you can almost have an organization that's 1 or 2 people, but having algorithms in place that makes it efficient. Then leveraged assets like, Uber, Airbnb, that has hundreds of thousands of accommodations, but don't own any of them. And then engagement. How do you engage with your customers and your salespeople and your different people, your different stakeholders? So that's scale, staff on demand, community and crowd, algorithms, leveraged assets, and engagement. And then from the ideas, how do you manage and create an exponential organization? That's on interfaces, dashboards, real-time dashboards, experimentation, so you can see how your organization's going, autonomy, so every division of your company can operate autonomously, and then putting social in place within an organization. That's, those are the different things like Microsoft Teams, or different ways that organizations can act socially with each other, employees within an organization. So that's the ideas acronym and the scale acronym that helps an organization to become an exponential organization. And the great thing is that they looked and they said that you need 4 of the 11 attributes for a company to become an exponential organization. So you don't need all 11. You can have a company that does staff on demand, that uses engagement, that does autonomy and does dashboards, and then an MTP. And that particular organization will grow exponentially based on those 4 or 5 attributes from the 11.
Yeah, it doesn't take them all. You don't have to check all the boxes. It's really the unique combinations that get you sort of a variation on a theme. The interesting part of the theme is, the exponential growth. There's lots of people that say, well, gee, we just make, wire cuttings, or we make stamped products, or we make subcomponents, if you will. They're not on the finished product or service side of things. How do you see this applying to them? Because those are the people that are probably the highest at risk of getting left behind, or getting, vertically integrated. How do you suggest that they adopt some of these things?
Well, so Salim Ismail will say that if you're not being disrupted, you need to disrupt yourself, otherwise you will be disrupted. And so any kind of organization needs to have processes and new innovations that will disrupt themselves. And so, you always look at Kodak and you think, why didn't Kodak actually invent the digital photography, photographs, and why did they go out of existence? And it's a common thing. But what we will say is it's because of the corporate immune system. And any organization will be faced with the corporate immune system, where an organization like Kodak would have said, okay, we got to block digital photography because it's taking away the revenue from our physical way that we're doing photography at the moment. And so if we go the digital route, we're going to become bankrupt and lose that revenue. So that will block, and that's called the corporate immune system. So organizations always need to be looking at ways of introducing new innovation, but actually doing it as an edge initiative. So you could be launching that as a completely standalone, that one day will be much more, the performance will be 10x or more than your current solutions that you offer. And Apple is really, really good at that. If you look at Apple, they had the iPod. And then when they brought out the iPod, they brought out the iPhone. And then the iPad. So they're always looking for different ways of introducing new products, new services that will replace the existing ones. And AWS, for example, Amazon Web Services, are also really good at that. They will actively looking at services that replace the incumbent services and do that. I mean, if you look at Marriott, for example, why didn't they invent Airbnb or TripAdvisor? Why didn't they come up with those solutions themselves? So you're looking at options. And so from a from an OpenExO or an exponential organization, what we look at is something called a 10-week EXO sprint. That's the ultimate way that we can help companies come up with solutions. And that's, identifying opportunities, coming up with solutions, coming up with a minimum viable product, and then implementing them in the space of 10 weeks, taking teams from an organization, separating them from that organization, making them look at those solutions, and then implementing them as a standalone sort of organization that is outside of the existing organization. So you've got core processes that you can help refine, but then edge initiatives that hopefully will one day replace the core processes that the current organization has. You don't want to go and obviously replace everything that the core organization's doing. You don't want to totally ruin it, but you want to start introducing those new initiatives. I
think it's interesting, the models that are developing now are in some ways, from my perspective, because I chased Moore's Law for over 30 years. And keeping up with Moore's Law is counterintuitive. People think, oh, you just run faster. Actually, you get up earlier and run harder. And part of it is devouring your young. Intel started this way back in the early 80s, of having design teams that actually were off node. In other words, you had one node group and then you started another one. And the whole idea of the next one was to devour the one that came before. So as you come down the process curve, if you will, you're constantly looking to get to the next node, which is intended to devour the previous node. So some of these things, it's very interesting to watch how companies that have lived the exponential world, we lived it in the equipment side, supplying these guys, we had to be ahead of them. Where's my tool to do X, right? So it's very interesting to see sort of a repackaging of some of these concepts that have already been out there. And we look to the modern company or the current company, but you don't go back in and look at the companies that already developed it, already did it, already perfected it. That to me is an interesting dichotomy. What is it
that still happens all the time, though?
Yeah,
it still happens all the time that companies will not do the new initiative.
Right. So the uniqueness isn't so much the process, because that process is, I think, not necessarily understood. It's getting, like I said, repackaged and espoused differently. But what is it that is the constant theme that some companies adopted and some companies don't?
Yeah, absolutely. Just people who won't change, and it really is that corporate immune system that will derail people the whole time. And so, people make up an organization. And so you will have people within an organization that have bonuses, that have KPIs that reflect their current products and services. And so all of these people will naturally rebel against the new initiatives because it affects their earnings. Like if I'm getting my bonus from something that is going to be at risk with a new initiative, then I'm obviously going to try and kill it because I'm not going to get my bonus. And that's the problem, because it'll affect your medium to long-term future of that organization. But you will do that because your short-term risks are being impacted by this new initiative that could be there. Michael, is it possible for me to quickly go through Peter Diamante's 6 Ds of digital disruption? Because I think that really helps the discussion.
Yeah.
Where people can understand why, the EDGE initiative and the way that you can look at development goes. And that 6 Ds of digital disruption goes through the different areas are demonetization, when people get cheaper, dematerialization. Well, let's start with digitization of a product, then deception, because as the new product gets launched, it won't be making changes as fast as you do. And that happens with all exponential technology. At the beginning stage, it will seem like nothing's taking place until things start doubling to the point where they make a dramatic breakthrough all of a sudden. And then that's where disruption takes place. Suddenly it'll disrupt your organization. And then demonetization will happen where things get cheaper. And all of a sudden, from Kodak perspective, your product that you used to do from a physical perspective now costs absolutely nothing to do it from a digital perspective. And then dematerialization will happen when things get smaller. Every single cell phone will have a camera to it. And finally, democratization, where everything now is available to anybody in the world. Everybody with a cell phone will be able to take photographs. And so now all of a sudden, let's say Kodak needs to change and change very, very rapidly, because that exponential technology is changing the business model that Kodak has. And so that needs to take place all the time. How are organizations looking at their business models changing from a physical product or any kind of product that now becomes cheap, dematerialized, etc. And that's a major challenge that we've all got to face, and everyone faces. Whether it's Netflix or Airbnb or Uber, they're all going to face that potential problem in the future. They might be the disruption for today.
We even have a label for the people that don't make it. We call them flash boiled frogs.
Okay, good.
So Lance, such a great discussion. I think we could spend hours here talking about all these great topics. There's so much synergy between the work you're doing, the things that we've been talking about, the book that we have coming out called The Exponential Era that's going to be published in November. I mean, there's just so much exciting and important issues that we need to discuss that I think a lot of companies are really struggling with, especially, during these times of chaotic changes. COVID has been an accelerator, and these are such timely topics for us to talk about. So thank you so much for joining us today. Unfortunately, we've come to the end of our time here for the webcast. But before we close, I'd like for you to just give us your final thoughts on advice that you might have for companies that are struggling with exponential growth, and then tell the audience how they can get a hold of you and get more information about the work that you do.
Awesome. Thank you so much, David. So the first thing is to read the book, Exponential Organizations. It's available on Amazon, so go ahead and read that. It's well worth it. Then the second thing is to look at OpenExO. So www.openexo.com. And you can register and sign up. It's now got 5,800 members worldwide. So anybody's able to join. And then the third thing is, please go to my website. There's a lot of exciting things happening on my website. And that's www.ideastorm, as in the weather pattern. So ideastorm.co.za. So it's not com, unfortunately. Dell has got the Ideastorm as a com, but I've got it as a co.za. So www.ideastorm.co.za. And it's got a lot of stuff in there. It's got a lot of, I focus on exponential technology, so you can read and see all the different new exponential technology breakthroughs. It's got articles that I get from the people that I interview worldwide, so experts. There's a lot of information on ideastorm.co.za, and I'd love you to subscribe and become a partner on my website. That would really be fantastic.
Love to.
All right, very good. Thank you very much, Lance. It was a pleasure having you here with us in the webcast.
Thank you so much, David. Thank you so much, Michael. And I look forward to interviewing you as well on your book.
Oh, thank you. That'd be great.
Take care.
Thank you, everybody.